This remarkable film, overlooked simply because of its title, perfectly captures the twilight of the Spanish Empire. As the first empire on which the sun never set in human history, Spain in the 16th and 17th centuries was undeniably powerful, once planning to conquer the Ming dynasty with an army of 20,000 men. Unfortunately, before this plan could be executed, a massive conflict swept across Europe due to the so-called Reformation. In this war, the main force of the Spanish Empire's army was ultimately defeated by France, leading to the decline of the once mighty empire. In 1623, on the streets of Madrid, a thrilling duel was taking place. However, both sides quickly sensed that the other was not simple. During the fight, Diego stopped his companion, suggesting they first clarify the situation. Diego was a down-and-out mercenary who occasionally took on special tasks to make ends meet when there were no wars. One day, the Inquisition chairman, Fray, hired him to assassinate two individuals deemed heretics by the church. To uncover their identities, Diego brought them to his old comrade, Guadalmedina. However, Guadalmedina warned Diego that if those two were killed, Diego would surely be sent to the gallows. Although Diego was perplexed, he refused to disclose his employer's information out of professional ethics as a mercenary. Soon after, this matter reached the ears of King Felipe IV. His confidant, Count Oliveras, reported that the missing individuals were actually the British Crown Prince and the Marquis of Buckingham. Previously, the king had been considering marrying his sister to the British Crown Prince, indicating that someone was plotting to sabotage this marriage. Throughout his years as a mercenary, Diego had not married or had children, but he did have a romantic connection. Her name was Maria, a well-known actress, and the dullness of her married life gradually brought her closer to Diego. Meanwhile, Oliveras had learned of the Inquisition's conspiracy and discovered that the one who had let the Crown Prince go was a seasoned mercenary. However, he did not intend to punish Diego. Instead, he ordered him to fight in Flanders to redeem himself. For the nobility, their world was always clean, and the blood and carnage of the battlefield seemed unrelated to them. They only needed to draw a few circles on a map to decide a person's fate. Perhaps this is the tragedy of ordinary people. In 1625, at the Dutch border fortress of Breda, the Spanish army had besieged the place for a year. Diego and his comrades spent a long time in the cold, damp trenches. At this point, the Spanish Empire was showing signs of decline, with the income from colonies lining the pockets of the nobility. During a break, the commander ordered Diego and his men to blow up the enemy's tunnels. The men protested, stating they hadn't received their pay in 5 months and were barely clothed and fed. The chief, however, stated that he and even the general had likewise not been paid, and that there were difficulties which they would have to overcome. With no choice, Diego and his comrades had to endure the dust of the tunnels, crawling in the stench of corpses as they filled the explosives. They worked carefully, not daring to breathe, fearing they would alert the enemy. After they painstakingly completed their task, the commander informed them that the war was over. After a year of siege, the Dutch chose to surrender to the Spanish commander. This was a minor defeat in the Dutch resistance against Spanish colonialism, but ultimately the Dutch successfully recaptured the fortress. However, this was Felipe IV's only military victory in his lifetime. 10 years after this war, the boastful Felipe IV requested a painter to record the scene of his victory, naming it the Surrender of Breda. After returning from the fighting in Flanders, Diego and his comrades were immediately assigned by Oliveras to rob a ship transporting gold. Guadalmedina, as the operations commander, had planned everything. This batch of gold was something the king wanted to keep for himself, so he could only hire mercenaries willing to sell their lives for money. Later, Diego went to see his lover Maria. At this point, Maria's husband was not expected to live much longer, and she hoped Diego would marry her. But as a mercenary, Diego knew he was unable to make promises to his lover, and this love was destined to become increasingly bitter. Before long, Diego led his old comrades to begin the ship robbery as planned. Unfortunately, the soldiers on the ship discovered them. After a fierce fight, the veterans managed to eliminate the guards on the ship. While checking the gold in the hold, one of Diego's former comrades, out of curiosity, followed him. Upon discovering the gold, he demanded that Diego share the wealth equally. Diego knew that this cargo belonged to the king, so to protect the lives of the others, he had no choice but to painfully kill his former friend. After completing the mission, Diego went before the king to request his reward. Felipe IV directly gave Diego his gold chain. Diego was so surprised that he is momentarily slowed down by the sight of the king casually pulling out rewards that would require him to work half his life. After some time, Madrid entered winter, and Diego prepared to return to a peaceful life. Infatuated, he sold the gold chain the king had given him and exchanged it for a gemstone necklace to give to Maria. Diego wanted to express his true feelings with this gift, as he planned to propose to Maria. However, when he arrives at Maria's house, he finds Guadalmedina, who has become an archduke, standing guard. To see his beloved, Diego was willing to draw his sword against Guadalmedina. As the two faced off, a figure emerged from Maria's house. It was Felipe IV. The king stood at the door, seemingly flaunting his presence before Diego. At that moment, Diego felt despair. No matter how capable he was, he could not stop the king from taking his beloved. What saddened him even more was that Maria refused to say another word to him. Because Diego had once been with Maria, Guadalmedina prepared to arrest him on behalf of the king. Although Diego was skilled, he was ultimately outnumbered, and due to exhaustion, he was defeated and severely injured. After some time of recovery, Diego's wounds healed. He arrived at a treatment hospital in Madrid, where the king had already revoked the arrest warrant against him. There, he encountered his former lover, Maria. After infection with the virus, Maria had been abandoned by the king, but Diego had never forgotten his love for her. He brought the necklace he had originally intended to propose with to Maria. In his eyes, Maria would always be his beloved treasure. Seeing Diego's unwavering devotion, Maria was moved and shed tears of shame. In an era dominated by power, their love was destined to have no outcome, yet Diego still devoted all his love to Maria. In May 1643, Diego had joined the Spanish Cartagena infantry regiment. At this time, he was stationed in Rulers, fighting against the French on behalf of Spain. The Spanish side was armed with pikes, and there were also many infantrymen wielding firearms in the formation. This was the famed Spanish square, known as the Flower of Infantry. The French first bombarded the Spanish positions with cannons, then sent in cavalry charges. The Spanish soldiers retaliated with heavy matchlock guns, which had tremendous power. As the French cavalry was about to charge, the Spanish soldiers formed a barrier with their pikes to prevent the cavalry from colliding with them. The battle was extremely fierce, with most soldiers on the battlefield wearing incomplete armor, making it easy for the enemy to find their weaknesses, resulting in many soldiers losing their lives. After a grueling fight, the Spanish soldiers repelled the French attack at a great cost. The French admired the bravery of the Spanish infantry, but by this time, the main force of the Spanish army had been severely depleted, and it was meaningless to continue resisting. They were willing to accept the surrender of the Spanish forces, but Diego and the others refused. After saying this, Diego led his remaining soldiers away, forming a square to prepare for the next wave of attacks from the French. But Diego knew this would be his last battle. Facing the oncoming French cavalry, Diego was ready to die on the battlefield. As an ordinary man, he was trampled and humiliated by the privileged class, but as a soldier, he defended his last dignity on the battlefield. In this battle alone, the Spanish lost 8,000 men, while the French lost 6,000. The glory of the Spanish square was gone forever, and the era of French dominance in Europe began.